Hello there, guys. Welcome back to another episode of E&Ftv. Today is a very special one. I've got someone that I've been wanting to get on the channel for quite some time. My diary and Neal's diary has been difficult to put together, but we've got there in the end. And I'm so happy that Neal's on the show today. So, without further ado, introducing Neal Stone, founder of leapSTONE Limited. Neal, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled that we got the diaries to line up.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so just for a bit of backstory for anyone obviously watching this episode that doesn't know who Neal is, I originally sort of heard Neal speaking at Hosspace last year, so in 2024. Um, and Neal spoke with such, I suppose, conviction within the design space. And I'm not, for anybody that knows me, I'm not from a design world. I don't understand a lot of it. But Neal did an incredibly good job of making people like me understand how design can really impact not just, hospitality or anything like that, but any business. And as soon as I saw Neal coming out and he was just about to leave the conference and grab his coats, I had to grab him and say, look, it was inspiring. It was fantastic. I would love to get you on the show. And here we are, nearly 12 months later, and we've got you on. So, for anyone that doesn't know, Neal was one of the masterminds behind the invention and creation and design of the lie down bed in business class within British Airways, which, like I said off camera, Neal, that is one hell of a tagline. And I couldn't start this episode without at least mentioning it. So before we get into it, though, guys, please do like this episode, comment your thoughts down below. If you've got any questions for Neal or if you've got any comments on design within your business, we would love to hear them. So please do put them in the comment section down below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We've got over 320 episodes now. With leaders in all different fields, talking all things commercial, talking all things design in this case today, and bringing you fantastic content every single Thursday. So, but to do that and to get more guests on the show, we need a really great community around us. So please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already and join the community. So, Neal, okay, here we go. Neal, for anyone that doesn't know, so to anyone that doesn't know you, doesn't know your background and this sort of thing, it'd be great to understand a bit about your career, your background, what's brought you to where you are today, and what it is that you do for your clients these days, basically.
Sure. Okay. Well, thanks for the intro, by the way, Tom. That's amazing. I'm blushing. Uh, Background. I suppose one of the first things to say is that I'm kind of fulfilling a childhood dream. I always wanted to be a designer. I went to study product design at uni. I was lucky to
Right.
get a place at uni to study product. I joined the design team at British Airways, which you already
Yeah.
name checked. Interestingly, when I first joined that team, it was still a kind of creative services team.
Right.
And as I sort of grew up through the 12 years that I was at BA, the team turned into a design management function. And when I left, and I was head of design when I left, we were doing what we would now call end-to-end experience design. So we
Right.
sort of saw this role of design grow from being about, for example, supplying logos and Pantone references for how to kind
Sure.
of reproduce the logo to actually end-to-end innovation and experience for customers, which I
Right.
think is an interesting sort of thing that's echoed on since I left and set up leapSTONE. You already mentioned about flatbeds. I think
Mm.
what's really interesting about that project was that was born out of a really, really deep understanding of what customers needed from long haul
Yeah.
business class travel. We could spend a whole episode talking about that project alone, I'm sure. But I think, again, that's another echo that's informed lots of my practice
Mm.
since, which is be really clear on the problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And the leadership at the airline at that time were really fantastic about setting an open and challenging brief that let the design team go and explore
Yeah.
Really, really powerful answers to that brief. I spent time in the railways as well in the UK. I was head of
Yeah.
design for G&ER, the railway firm that runs out of King's Cross up the East Coast Main Line, and
Hmm.
redesigned their main fleet of trains. And I've also advised on setting up the Royal College of Art Service Design Masters. That's a
Oh,
hugely
wow.
popular course now. Again, may be very interesting to some of your listeners around this kind
Mm.
of role of service design, which is a relatively new field of design in the big scheme of things. And I've taught design and innovation at some of the amazing business schools around the place. So a kind of a mixed kind of bag of experience that's led me
Yeah.
here. Set up leapSTONE in 2009.
Right. Okay. And so leapstone then. So again, for anyone that doesn't know leapstone, what is leapstone? What does it do for its clients? How do you support your clients, I suppose?
Great question. Again, possibly need a whole episode to answer the question fully, but the one line answer is it's a kind of boutique design and innovation practice, if you
Right.
like.
Okay. Yeah.
It doesn't specialize in one area. So often, if you go to a design team, they'll have a specialty that they look at, like graphic design or product design or interior design.
Sure.
When I set up, I deliberately wanted to float at that design management, design leadership level to kind of
Right.
figure out with clients what's the issue that they're trying to solve for, and therefore what's the type of design that might best answer that question.
Right. Okay.
In a few cases, it's actually directing them off elsewhere, that there isn't a kind of design role to play ongoing.
Sure.
Um, so it's a real mix of delivery, some workshop based, lots of coaching with senior leaders and kind of
Right.
coaching through projects, some sleeves rolled up, kind
Yeah.
of hands-on project delivery work too. Um, Tending to be more and more C-suite and senior leaders knocking on the door these
Yeah.
days, tending to be more focused on service design as opposed to the design of a particular product,
Yes.
of a static thing. And a mixed bag of, deliberately mixed bag of client work. So
Yeah.
I've got lots of commercial client work on. I also like to do work with NGOs, so kind of charitable organizations and work in the
Yeah.
public sector.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pick a few examples. Work with a kind of global hotel group on global guest experience and design projects,
Yeah.
including helping set up that function. Work with Southwestern Railway. Work with the BBC. Work with lots of amazing charities. And work with the NHS on reducing violence and aggression in A&E. So a
Right.
real kind of broad band um, of different experiences and project work.
Wow. And again, just from the eclectic mix of clientele that you've got, again, this reinforces my point at the very start was that what or how you present design can really fit within any business, within recruitment, for goodness sake, with terms of our process and where we start. And are there those certain elements that can be adapted, can be changed, can be taken out completely? It's about looking, I suppose you come at it, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds very holistic. So you're not, as you say, it's not a specialism that you're just focusing on one area. You're looking at the whole picture and looking at how, or creating a way of how to solve maybe multiple challenges or challenges that they thought they had, but then there were other things that needed to be fixed before that challenge could be fixed. And that's what I got from our conversations previously and your presentation at Hospice was your approach to it was something that I've never seen before.
Well, I think it's very kind of you to say. I think the word design, that moniker, is sometimes unhelpful. People
Mm,
tend to think about design in a very practical,
I did, yeah,
colourful way.
yeah,
Um, I suppose you might think about design as a sort of structured form of problem solving. And if you think
sure,
about it more in those terms, then it's applicable to many more things.
yes, yeah,
Picking up on your point just then, I think one thing that clients come back, because I like to go back and talk to people 6, 12, sometimes 18 months after a piece of work and find out what
sure,
happened next, that they place enormous value on this rigor of looking at what the real problem is they're trying to solve. I
yeah,
think lots of your viewers would relate to this comment that in day-to-day world, the temptation to knee jerk to solutions based on what we think is the problem is,
Sure.
it's just the Monday morning issue of we see a problem, we've got to go and find solutions to fix it up.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
taking that breather to properly think through the problem pays dividends down the track. I think
Absolutely.
clients have also said that they have found working in this way has help them to get to better thinking faster,
Okay.
to help them get to ideas that they just wouldn't have got to on their own. Um, and I think there's also in projects where there's more of a kind of collaborative or co-creative element, which is
Hmm.
a fairly sort of, again, relatively modern way of working in design projects.
Sure.
We see teams bonding, we see teams aligning, we
Yeah.
see greater levels of trust between different parts of a big organization, for example,
Mm.
because they've gone through this process together. They have greater ownership of what comes out of it as a result. So
Yeah.
there's all sorts of different spin-off factors that happen, and you're quite right. It can be applied to most things.
Yeah.
If it's stewarded in the right way, and of course it takes a kind of informed client to make that jump to say, well, actually, let's take a design approach to this, not another
Yeah.
traditional approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that sort of brings me on, I suppose, to my next question, which is, what is your overall idea behind design, and I suppose the principles or fundamental principles of it? Because again, you come at this very differently to whatever I've ever thought design was. And that really opened my mind to how it can be adapted to processes, practices, functional structure within businesses, all of that sort of stuff. So, what in that sort of incredible brain of yours, what does design, I guess, mean to you, and what are those principles?
So I was going to start with actually, my first response is incredibly effective.
Okay,
Um, and I think I'll unpack kind of more sort of about the principles of design in just a second, but we're now lucky there's quite a few studies that have gone on as to the effectiveness of design,
right,
including one that showed a group of design-led companies outperforming their peer group by about 200% over a 10-year period.
right,
And actually, if you take a step back, it shouldn't really surprise us because one of the core principles of design is really think through what the problem is that you're trying to solve,
yep,
work in a kind of very people-centered way, and kind of build, test, learn things out. And so it stands to reason that those organizations that get this way of working and fully embrace it are more likely to outperform their peers who maybe are doing less of it, or maybe are more driven by process, or
hmm,
perhaps for whatever reason are reticent to get involved and try new things out. So I
yeah,
think there's a sort of a backdrop to all of this, which is to disambiguate any of your viewers who are thinking design's all very well, but the kind of colouring in piece isn't for me. No, this
sure,
is a fundamental business tool.
yeah,
We see the rise of lots of chief design officers all over the world in
yeah,
businesses of all kinds of size. So that's the first point. Next point I would say is actually we're not just trying to pretty things up. Uh,
mhm.
there's a brilliant book which is called Change by Design by a guy called Tim Brown.
Okay,
And in that book, Tim sort of introduces this idea of trying to find things that are desirable, viable, and feasible. So by
cool,
desirable, he means, is this something that people want?
yeah,
Have we understood the problems that they have? And by the way, we can think about colleagues in this context too. So this is not
mm,
just about end customers, but for example, colleagues in the hospitality industry. What are the challenges that they face, say, at the front desk or
yeah,
back of house, and how can we design around those challenges? So desirable,
yeah,
what's needed.
yeah,
The viable piece is really what is sustainable from a triple bottom line point of view. So is it financially, is it environmentally, is it socially sustainable?
sure,
And feasible is actually what's technically deliverable. It's all very well to invent something that we think customers will want and that we can prove that they might pay for, but if
mm,
we don't know how we're going to deliver it, then it's going to go nowhere. So we've got to
yeah,
try and find the balance between these things. That's what good design practice does.
yeah,
I suppose the other thing, we've mentioned this a couple of times, is this idea about really being laser guided on the problem before you
hmm,
get going.
yeah,
Um, so often, um, so often in organizations, we have this kind of pressure to get stuff out the door.
Hmm.
And we'll often be responding to, if you like, the symptoms. Um, and actually, good design practice is about kind of peeling that back and sort of inquiring and maybe going and doing some design research interviews with key people around the
Yeah.
challenge. Let's really understand get to a good problem is
Yeah.
actually a really good start point. It's very people centered.
Yes.
Lots of other processes will kind of grind their way to an answer. Design is inherently people-centered, whether that's about going and interviewing people or doing
Hmm.
observational research, or whether it's actually bringing people into a workshop setting and designing it with them. I mean, that's a whole kind of participatory design is a very, very powerful thing.
Yeah.
And it's collaborative, like I've said. And I think the other thing that I've seen it do is it shines a light often on, for senior leaders, it shines a light on the reality of what's going on.
Yes.
So often um, as organizations grow, the senior leadership necessarily get dragged a little bit away from what's actually happening kind of on the shop floor, what's actually
Yeah.
happening on
Yeah.
the ground. And because these processes obsess with what's the customer experiencing, what's the colleague experiencing here,
Mm.
um, when that gets back into the room with kind of senior leaders taking part, it can be quite revealing. And so
Yes.
the sense of agency comes through that. Um, and I think that's kind of, I suppose, last part of quite a long answer, I suppose, to your question, but this idea of we tend to think more in terms of journeys now.
Yes.
To the
I
point
definitely do. Yeah.
it's almost a bit sort of hackneyed as a word, but everyone's on a journey. But this idea of actually how do I move through this journey, whether that's, for example, a patient journey in healthcare, whether
Hmm.
that's a guest experience journey in hospitality,
Mm.
whether it's a citizen journey with a local authority, uh,
Hmm.
how do I navigate getting a bus pass for a child who's starting at a new school? What
Yes.
does that all look like? And how does that journey hang together? And then critically, how might we change how we organize it ourselves and deliver that to make it better?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not just about the kind of the light-hearted, if you say, of, if you might say, of what the end experience needs to be, but actually, how do we make the change to go deliver that and make sure it's
Yeah. And
repeatable?
again, it's one of those where you're right. That journey piece, I I see everything within, I can only obviously speak for my own business and how we do things, but everything is a journey. So everything that we share online, we're just creating, in fact, a journey for our foundation. So we have a charitable function within our business that does a lot of things within the local community and all that sort of stuff. But what we were trying to figure out is how can we get more of our viewership to be engaging with our foundation content. And the first thing I gravitated towards was we need to create a journey for someone to tune in and want to see what happens next and what the end goal is. And the viewers to then build and they want to see what the outcome is and all this sort of stuff. That's how we approach our content now. So it's interesting you speak about journeys because that's something I've really been looking into a lot, and it seems to resonate with how I do things anyway, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a challenge. Once you start to see the world around us in terms of journeys, you can't unsee it.
Yes.
So it
Yeah,
does
yeah.
become a bit of a burden. And I think what's interesting about that framing of things is we can quite quickly diagnose where there are breakdowns in journeys.
Hmm.
I don't know, yeah, a silly example, there might be a coffee shop where the ordering, queuing, paying thing might be out of sequence.
Sure.
And actually it just jars. And these experiences, the vast majority of UK GDP is the service economy.
Hmm.
Um, and so we need to get our heads around this stuff. And actually, there are fantastically powerful tools of design to help us do that, whether that's using journeys to kind of frame to spot where the issues are,
Mm.
or using those journey mapping tools to lay out this is how we'd like it to be.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a whole kind of range of ways that you can do that. So you're absolutely right to be doing that with your foundation work.
Yeah. It's again, it's just when you said about journeys, it just resonated with how we're approaching things and how we have done in previously. Um, so, and again, this actually leads me quite. This is going brilliantly because this brings me on to my next question. Um, so, from your perspective, with your expertise, how does design help with times of uncertainty? Because again, within the hospitality industry, if I brought this back to, because a lot of our viewership are, of course, within that hospitality and travel and tourism space. So, how could that, or how could your view on how it helps with uncertainty also relate to our industry with regards to revenue management? Because again, that was something that I immediately locked onto with was how we go about revenue managing certain products, certain services, how we go about the guest experience side of things, which obviously will also impact the commercial strategy of a business. That uncertainty, we've seen that over the years with, of course, the pandemic, with the return of hospitality and return of travel within the UK market anyway. And the market was full of uncertainty. We didn't know which way was up, and we were trying to figure it out. But a lot of the systems that we were using were looking at past data, which again we've never had a situation like that before. So again, not to go, I went off on one there, but what are your thoughts on that side of things with regards to design helping with uncertainty? But how do you feel that that could relate to revenue management?
So I think there's a couple of points here. The first is I was sort of revealed this model about different project types and work by a guy called Eddie Obeng, who's brilliant in his field, and the fact that there are some projects where we're very, very clear on the outcomes and what we're trying
Mhm.
to do and how we're going to go and do that. And then there are other projects that are just inherently foggy,
Right.
complicated, uncertain. Um, so not all projects, not all challenges, not all briefs are created the same. I suppose that's the idea there. So
Yeah.
therefore, responding to your question about uncertainty, design thrives in that space.
Mm.
Actually, if we think about the creative process, although there are known steps to the creative process, there's an inherent uncertainty about it. We didn't go into the flatbeds project knowing that we were going to output a bed as the
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
In thinking we wanted to really revolutionize what long haul business class travel could look like.
Yeah.
Um, that having been said, these processes also need limits, and that's helpful from a commercial point of view. If someone's listening from a kind of commercial background,
Mm.
actually, we need to bookend these processes, or else they'll go on ad infinitum trying to find, better always. There's always a better way of doing things, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I suppose that's the first thing. So design absolutely thrives in that uncertainty world. I think the other thing is that we tend to go into design projects never pretending to know the answer. So
Okay.
we, we're always interested in inquiring and sort of turning over stones and seeing different bits of the challenge and thinking,
Mm.
actually, let's properly understand this. Let's understand the different people who are in the mix.
Mm.
Sometimes um, it's very helpful to look at to kind of open the lens up and think about the wider set of actors around a challenge,
Sure.
because actually the solution to a problem over here might be held by someone that we hadn't really thought about before over here.
Yes.
And I'm talking in general terms, but that's kind of that can be very powerful.
Yeah.
Um, and I suppose the big thing for organizations who might be bigger or more established who might be listening,
Mm.
was thinking about this, the that uncertainty thing I think probably feels far more of a challenge if I'm in an organization that is more process led or command and control,
Sure.
because actually I might not feel like I'm able to move with enough agility
Hmm.
to find a design solution out of it. So if I come back to thinking about this question of uncertainty, how does design deal with that? Well, we don't pretend to know the answer, so we go in, look at the problem, check back in with people. Have we, are we in the right territory about this problem? We might then go and sketch some ideas out. We might
Mm.
prototype some stuff. We'll certainly take that back to people and say, what do you reckon about this? Get
Yeah.
feedback, learn from the feedback, iterate, don't take the first answer as the right one, etc.,
Mm.
etc. So we can sort of navigate our way through that way. And I guess the other component here is this idea of scenarios and this
Yeah.
idea of if this happened, how might we respond to that?
Yeah.
Designers are very sort of happy at sort of playing around with, you know, wild ideas. And
Sure.
I think actually, if we work with clients who give the permission to play in these processes within this kind of safe space, then I think we might imagine scenarios and therefore imagine our responses to those scenarios, so we feel less caught out should things happen. Uh,
Yes.
I guess the big care point with all of this is that, and you know, I have worked in big organizations. The
Mm.
care point is there's an inherent tension between business as usual and the kind of processes that run bigger, more established things at scale,
Yeah.
and this necessity to go and I've used the word explore a few times. This idea about sort of going out and finding out about a problem or exploring what
Yeah.
would happen if a particular scenario happened. That doesn't feel comfortable a way of working to lots of people who are in a kind of big organization or more established organization that is just kind of keeping the wheels turning and has processes to do that. So I
Yeah.
think it's really important for design to have this kind of permission to play, this permission to explore, this permission to try stuff out.
Yeah.
I was going to go on to say permission to fail, which
Mm.
is needs to be very carefully pitched.
Sure.
Obviously, in certain safety settings, there's no room for failure. We need to be incredibly careful about that.
Yeah.
Uh, but actually, an inherent part of the most successful products and services is actually they already failed 100 times at the prototype
Of
stage,
course.
and
Yeah.
that's part of the design process.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think that's a kind of that's a sort of slightly sort of broader piece. You asked about revenue management and kind of commercial people who
Yeah.
might be doing. Um, I think what I would say there is we've talked a lot about so the design of products or services,
Mm.
be it across a kind of wide range of applications. Um, we we can and I do often get involved in the design of a business, the design
Yes.
of a business model, the design of a value proposition. So at that kind of higher level, as opposed to the design of the eventual product or service.
Sure.
So I think, and why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to kind of prototype with different ways of doing business, especially
Yeah.
if you're facing a particular challenge? That's an incredibly interesting thing to do. And there's lots of ways that you can prototype and test that too. So I
Yeah.
think, you know, as you rightly picked up from my host talk, you know, there's
Mm.
lots of different places, sectors that this can be deployed, but it can be used at different altitudes, if you like, within a business too.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's looking at it. The thing with revenue management is it's forever changing. So we've seen a lot of change in the last 10 years, last 20 years. Um, but what I've come to realize within certain elements of hospitality revenue management, more specifically within the meetings and events space, for example, the complexity and depth within just looking at the meeting space rather than bedrooms it just seems like a far greater challenge and something that we've been working on for the last 3 years, with 20 industry leaders all coming up with these fundamental changes to how we do it. And I suppose that harks back to your point of we need to break it down to basics before we can fix the problem. So we need to dial it back, identify what needs to be done, what needs to be changed, who we need to collaborate with. And I suppose that also comes back to revenue management as a whole, because revenue management is strategy. It is commercial strategy directed towards optimizing performance, whether that be bedrooms, seats on an airplane, cabin in a cruise, seat on a train, whatever it is. And what we're constantly trying to do, of course, is increase revenue. We're trying to optimize and optimize and optimize. I suppose with design, or if you approached it from a design perspective, if you were looking to step away from the 1 or 2% growth year on year, but you focused on, again, maybe bringing it back to basics with somebody like you, where that classic fresh pair of eyes, you're not coming at it from a revenue management perspective, you're coming at it from a design perspective. Notice how I was like less closed vision, more open vision. Um, because I think that could fundamentally help with lots of different commercial processes, strategies, and ultimately optimize performance. And that was those were the biggest takeaways for me because I just saw these immediate links with where our industry is at from the commercial perspective and how design could potentially impact and have a really positive impact on it.
Mm. I agree with everything that you just said. I think, I mean, there are so many projects that I have started with a client, and I will write into the proposal, please note I am not a subject matter expert in this
Sure.
area,
Yeah.
um, but I do know a thing or two about good design and innovation
Yeah.
practice. And I think actually there's a couple of pieces there just to pick up on sort of resonate what you just said, but
Yeah.
not being in the field helps.
Yes.
In fact, there are some fantastic examples of completely sort of cross-sector innovation where, for
Mm.
example, there's a very famous London hospital that specialise in the care of children that were learning from Formula One pit stop
Right.
handover. It's about
Yeah.
sort of rapid exchange of information in
Hmm.
acute care settings. Um, so I think there's a piece there. And then just the third piece to echo is picking up on this thread of I'd be super interested to unpack what is the real problem that we're trying to solve here. So
Sure.
you said it's commercial optimization as a kind of catch-all for the purposes of this, but it'd be
Mm.
really interesting to kind of double click on that and say, well, actually, what do we mean by that? And
Sure.
really get that. Because I dare say you often find that there's sort of nested challenges within an overall kind of thing that we're trying to go for. And
Hmm.
once you start to break that down, then you can go after, designing and innovating in each of those realms. I think it'd be an
Absolutely.
interesting brief.
Yeah. No, this is what I mean. This is exactly it. Is because it is again just bringing it back to revenue management specifically because it has changed so much, and I do see it. I say it like I'm the expert, but I do see it from my perspective changing dramatically over the 5, 10 years to come
Mm,
because it's still relatively within its infancy. So we're going to see more change. We're going to see a lot of change on the M&E side, so the meetings and event side. And again, I think just because something, and I've always thought this, but just because something's been done for since it's existed, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way to do it in today's world. It might have been 10, 20, 30 years ago, but things have changed. And I think with this approach in terms of design, that could be a really big opportunity for an industry to say, this has worked. We're doing a good job, but could we do a better one rather than just increasing that by another 1.5%? Could we look at fundamentally the design of our process towards our commercial strategy rather than this is what we've always known? And again, it may well work, but I just think poking the bear and asking the question and opening that box could yield some, well, I say yield, some brilliant results.
yeah, I mean, there's a sort of slightly tongue-in-cheek line about the light bulb not coming out with the continuous improvement of the candle.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, that's not to knock continuous improvement. It's a very, very successful, tried and tested technique of making things better.
Yeah.
So not knocking that for a second, but actually sometimes it does help to kind of kick the tires and think, actually, is there a completely different way of doing this? Is
Yeah.
a complete better way of achieving our core ambition? Going back to those things, is it something that's desirable, viable, and feasible? And
Hmm.
design's got the keys to unlock that, I would say.
There you go. Guys, that is a really interesting point. So, anything that you've got in terms of thoughts with the opportunity to drive change in the commercial space of hospitality and travel and tourism through design, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Neal, before we close this off, with all the projects and everything that you've done over the years, the accomplishments and the taglines that you've got, what's going on within your business at the moment? Is there anything exciting coming up for you, or obviously leapSTONE in general?
Yeah, there's never a dull moment. Um, I've got some really interesting sidebar R&D projects going on, sort of like
Brilliant.
real things that I'm sort of looking at developing. Watch this space.
Yeah,
Um, Currently also doing some, I was going to say experiments, but sort of like exploring and experimenting with the role of Gen AI in the creative process.
right. Yeah,
So we've got this far in the talk, haven't we, or the conversation before mentioning AI.
yeah,
Think it's got tremendous potential to disrupt the creative services, to disrupt, design thinking
sure.
positively and kind of negatively. I'll
Hmm.
come to that in a second. So definitely looking at that. And correspondingly, thinking about how design practice can help organizations look at technology through the lens of, the threat and the opportunity. So for
Sure.
lots of client organizations, they might be looking at the moment thinking Gen AI is posing a massive threat. Therefore, how might we use design and innovation to counter that?
Yeah.
Similarly, there might be other organizations who are sitting there thinking, we think that there's an enormous opportunity to sit on the shoulders of this stuff and it's going to really
Hmm.
augment or accelerate us. How might we use design practice to do that? So that's another kind of field I'm looking at. Um, and then the other two things to mention, I'm developing my creative coaching offer for senior leaders,
Oh, awesome. Okay.
which I'm kind of really excited about. I've been doing lots and lots of coaching. I realize actually the thing that I get brilliant feedback about is sort of helping people use creativity and design in their world and kind of doing
Hmm.
that in a coaching format. I think actually there's never been a more important time for this,
Yeah.
especially for going back to what I was saying earlier, senior leaders in bigger, more established organizations who may need to feel like they can move with greater agility, greater speed.
Mm.
The speed at which stuff can be spun up now is extraordinary.
Yes.
We could knock up a fairly functional app prototype using natural language prompts and have something up and running by the end of the afternoon, kind of thing.
Sure.
So actually, the ability for senior leaders to work with creativity, to work with design, and to feel like they have some of those tools at their fingertips is
Hmm.
really, really critical. So creative coaching for senior leaders. And the
Hmm.
last thing is, and this is more of a kind of ongoing thing, just trying to
Mm.
shift my work mix a little bit to balance it. Um, I've particularly loved it over the years where I've got really into one or two bigger clients on a more kind of bigger ongoing project, maybe some
Sure.
more exploratory, more transformative, um, to run that alongside the mix of fantastic client work that I already have,
Yeah.
but something that has sort of greater sort of longitude, if you like.
Absolutely.
So just trying to shake things up a bit there. So lots going on, never a dull moment.
Oh, well, it's glad I'm glad to hear it, but I'm also excited to see what you come up with next. Um, one thing that I think could be a really just sort of coming back to your design approach to reducing or ultimately stopping violence towards workers within the NHS. There's something that I experienced when I worked in hospitality myself was when a coach load of tourists come to the hotel and they've all got bags that need to go to rooms, they all want to check in at the same time and all this sort of stuff. It's processes like that because, like any hotel, and I did it myself, you'd get the walkie-talkie going off saying, basically, all hands on deck, everyone to reception. We need to get bags to rooms. We need to do this. We need to do that. There's got to be opportunity to help with functional on the ground processes for hospitality, but as I say, those more behind the scenes commercial strategy elements as well. Um, so what I'd say to anybody watching this at this stage, if you're working within the hospitality, travel and tourism industry and you're watching this episode and you feel like, something like Neal's approach to design could help with your on property situation or centralized commercial situation, please do. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. He'd love to have a chat with you and see how design could impact your business positively, or processes and so on and so forth. So yeah, Please do. I'll pop Neal's details down below. If you want to get in touch with Neal directly, then please do.
100%.
Neal, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm so, as I said at the start, I'm so happy we finally got this in the diary.
Likewise, it's been a real pleasure to chat and talk about some of the things I'm so passionate about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm looking for because for anyone again, for anyone that's getting this far in, Neal and I have been speaking about a couple of different things that we might be able to have him get involved in, which is really exciting. And we're going to see about a conference towards, I think it's the end of this year or start of next, which is something that Neal and I are talking about. And that's all around, again, revenue management. So watch this space because I'm excited about some other things that are to come. And Neal, I would love to get you back on, say in 6, 12 months' time, hear how things are going your end, find out about the world of design again in 2026, and maybe find out if there's any movement on the hospitality, travel, and tourism side of things. Because I'd love to hear if anything does appear on your radar within your client base on that side.
Be a pleasure. It'd be a pleasure. We can get it in the
Fantastic.
diary now.
Yes, good point. I think that's a good idea. I think that's a good idea. Um, right, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. As ever, we really, really do appreciate it. As I said at the start, please don't forget to like the episode, comment your thoughts down below. If anything's resonated with you today, if it's something you want to explore with Neal, let us know. If you've got any questions, please drop them down below. And of course, don't forget to click that subscribe button on YouTube. To build this community, we need more people subscribing. We want to bring you fantastic content with great guests like Neal. And to do that, we need a brilliant, brilliant, and growing community around us. So thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.